What if I told you that one text message could destroy 15 years of marriage, and that another text message could destroy the person who sent it? Well, buckle up, because you're about to hear the most insane story of betrayal and revenge that will leave you absolutely speechless. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Veronica, and today I'm sharing a story that proves sometimes the quiet ones are the most dangerous. If you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because this story has everything a cheating husband, stolen life savings, fake hunting trips, and the most satisfying legal takedown you've ever witnessed. Everything I'm about to tell you is 100% true, and I have the receipts to prove it. So let me paint you a picture. I'm 45 years old, living in beautiful Tucson, Arizona. And for 15 long years, I've been the financial mastermind behind my marriage, while my husband Darren charmed clients and closed deals as a salesman at Travant Corporation. I was the one turning his sporadic commissions into real lasting wealth. I'm talking about a six-figure emergency fund that took me 10 years to build, retirement accounts that would have given us a comfortable life well into our 70s, diversified investment portfolios that made our friends green with envy, and even a special dream fund I'd been secretly building for the lake house we plan to buy someday. Darren used to call me the brain behind our success. At dinner parties, he'd wrap his arm around my waist and proudly tell everyone, "I just make the money, she makes it grow." The pride in his voice made me feel valued, essential, and deeply loved. For over a decade, our system worked beautifully. We were that couple other people envied, financially secure, professionally successful, and seemingly unshakable. I genuinely believed we were partners in every sense of the word. But then everything changed when he met Sky Winters, 28 years old, blonde, ambitious, and apparently the next real estate mogul, at least in her own mind. She sold condos for a living and somehow convinced my successful husband that flipping houses was our ticket to millions. The irony was devastating. While I was building our financial empire, one careful decision at a time, Darren was being dazzled by someone who thought she was a real estate genius. The warning signs started showing up everywhere, but I was too trusting to see them clearly. There were late nights at the office that somehow smelled like expensive perfume instead of paperwork and industrial equipment. Weekend hunting trips began coincidentally aligning with Sky's out-of-town property visits. Darren started criticizing my conservative approach to money, suggesting we needed to think bigger and take some real risks for once in our lives. The worst part was listening to him come home with stories about Sky's incredible real estate victories. A condo she'd flipped for $20,000 in profit. A commercial property she'd helped a client purchase that supposedly doubled in value within months. Each story felt like an indirect criticism of my methods, a subtle suggestion that I was somehow holding us back from achieving greater success and living up to our true potential. I tried explaining the basics of risk management and the importance of steady growth over speculative gains, but Darren's eyes would glaze over during these conversations. I could literally see him mentally comparing my detailed spreadsheets and quarterly reports to Sky's exciting success stories. The woman who had once been his financial genius was slowly becoming his conservative anchor, apparently dragging down his dreams of quick riches and thrilling business ventures. What I didn't understand then was that those conversations weren't really about investment strategy at all. They were about justifying what he was already planning to do, building a narrative that would make his betrayal seem reasonable and even necessary for our future success. The hunting weekend that changed everything had been planned for months. Darren and his buddies from Travant Corporation had supposedly booked a cabin in the mountains outside Santa Fe, complete with professional guides and all the gear they'd need for what he enthusiastically called a real man's weekend. He'd been unusually excited about this trip, buying expensive new hunting clothes and spending hours online researching the area and studying maps. At the time, I was actually happy to see him enthusiastic about something that didn't involve criticism of my financial choices or comparisons to Sky's supposed business acumen. The first red flag should have been his reluctance to give me specific details about the cabin location. When I asked for the address in case of emergency, he waved me off, claiming the cell service would be terrible anyway, and that I should just relax and enjoy having the house to myself for a few days. The second red flag was his insistence on taking our tablet to download hunting apps, despite his usual complaints that technology ruined the authentic outdoor experience. But after 15 years of marriage, I trusted him completely. Why wouldn't I? We'd built a life together, shared dreams and goals, and overcome challenges as a team. Saturday afternoon arrived like any other weekend day. I was in our home office, reorganizing files and updating our investment spreadsheets, noting the steady growth in our accounts and feeling satisfied with our financial progress. That's when my phone buzzed with a message that would shatter my entire world in just a few short words. Moved our savings to Sky's real estate venture. She's ambitious, unlike you. We're going to flip houses together. I stared at that screen for what felt like an eternity, my brain absolutely refusing to process what I was reading. Then panic set in, and I grabbed our laptop with trembling fingers to log into our bank accounts. The joint savings account that had contained $87,000 just yesterday now showed a balance of $300. Our money market account was completely empty. Even the emergency fund that had taken me 10 years to carefully build was gone, vanished without a trace. But it was the second text message that truly revealed the depth of his betrayal and the casual cruelty of his actions. Don't bother calling. We're investing in something real for once. Sky knows what she's doing. This is our chance to actually make serious money instead of hiding it in boring accounts. 15 years of careful planning, sacrifice, and strategic thinking had just been reduced to boring accounts. The woman who had turned his sporadic commissions into genuine wealth was apparently just dead weight, holding back his entrepreneurial spirit and vision for the future. I walked to our kitchen window and looked out at our neighborhood, taking in the nice houses and manicured lawns that we'd been able to afford because of my supposedly boring financial management. Then I thought about Sky Winters, with her flashy social media posts about luxury properties, and her apparent ability to convince my husband that throwing our life savings at her untested business venture was somehow a brilliant investment strategy. That's when the shock began crystallizing into something much more dangerous: cold, calculated fury. Darren had just made the biggest mistake of his life, and he didn't even know it yet, because while he was busy playing real estate mogul with his ambitious young girlfriend, he'd forgotten one crucial detail about his boring conservative wife. I wasn't just good with money. I was absolutely excellent with revenge. My first instinct was to call Darren immediately and demand he reverse whatever insane transaction he'd just completed. But something stopped me, a voice in my head that sounded suspiciously like my mother, who'd always warned me that the first move in any crisis should be gathering information, not reacting emotionally and making things worse. So instead of picking up the phone, I opened my laptop and began systematically documenting everything. I took screenshots of our emptied accounts, saved copies of Darren's devastating text messages, and pulled up our banking history to trace exactly when and how these transfers had occurred. What I discovered made my blood run absolutely cold. The transactions hadn't happened today, during his supposed hunting trip in the mountains. They'd been executed on Thursday afternoon, just hours before he'd left for Santa Fe with his overnight bag and expensive hunting gear. He had deliberately drained our accounts and then looked me straight in the eye while lying about going hunting with his friends. But the real revelation came when I dug deeper into the transfer details and followed the money trail. The funds hadn't gone to any legitimate real estate investment company or corporate account. Every single dollar had been wired directly to a personal account belonging to Sky Winters. Not her business account, not a corporate investment fund, but her personal checking account. This meant the whole thing wasn't even a real business venture. It was either a personal loan to his girlfriend, or more likely, his way of funding their new life together, while leaving me with absolutely nothing. The level of premeditation was absolutely staggering. This wasn't a spontaneous decision made during a romantic weekend getaway. Darren had been planning this betrayal for weeks, maybe even months, while I'd been updating our investment spreadsheets and planning our financial future together. My hands were shaking as I picked up the phone to call our bank. The customer service representative was sympathetic but painfully clear, since both our names were on the accounts, and Darren had proper authorization. The transfers were technically legal. They couldn't reverse them without his written consent or a court order. The woman suggested I contact a lawyer immediately if I suspected fraud or financial abuse. A lawyer. The word echoed in my mind as I hung up the phone, and suddenly I remembered something that would change everything. 6 months ago, after hearing one too many horror stories about friends getting completely blindsided by cheating spouses, I'd done something that Darren had mocked as absolutely paranoid. I'd consulted with Judith Brennan, one of the most ruthless and successful divorce attorneys in all of Tucson. It wasn't because I suspected anything specific was wrong with our marriage, but because I believed in being prepared for every possible scenario life might throw at us. Darren had actually laughed when I told him about the consultation fee, calling it a complete waste of money and joking that I was already planning our divorce before we even had problems. Today, that consultation was about to become the best investment I'd ever made in my entire life. I'd kept Judith's business card in my home office filing cabinet, tucked away behind our tax documents where Darren would never think to look. As I pulled it out, I remembered her words from that initial meeting with crystal clarity. The key to surviving financial infidelity is moving faster than the cheating spouse expects. Most betrayed partners waste crucial time trying to understand why it happened or hoping for reconciliation. The smart ones protect themselves first and process emotions later. My phone call to Judith was brief and to the point. "This is Veronica Hale. We met 6 months ago for a consultation. My husband just stole our life savings and transferred it to his girlfriend. I want to go nuclear." Her response was immediate and reassuring. "I remember you perfectly. How much money are we talking about?" $87,000 in savings, plus whatever he can access from our other accounts, maybe $150,000 total. "When did the transfers occur?" "Thursday afternoon. He's currently in Santa Fe with his girlfriend, pretending to be on a hunting trip with his friends." "Perfect. We'll have restraining orders on the remaining accounts by Monday morning. Can you be in my office in 1 hour?" Judith Brennan's office was exactly what I'd remembered from my consultation 6 months earlier. Impressive, but not flashy, with the kind of understated elegance that suggested competence rather than desperation for clients. Floor-to-ceiling law books lined the walls, and her desk was organized with the precision of someone who'd built a successful career on attention to detail and strategic thinking. She was waiting for me when I arrived, having apparently cleared her entire Saturday afternoon for what she'd already identified as a priority case that required immediate action. "Show me everything," she said without any small talk, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. I handed over my phone with Darren's text messages and opened my laptop to display all the banking records I'd compiled during my investigation. Judith's expression remained completely neutral as she reviewed the evidence, but I caught the slight tightening around her eyes that suggested she'd seen this exact type of betrayal before and knew exactly how to respond to it. "Your husband made several critical mistakes," she said, after reviewing everything with professional thoroughness. "First, he documented his intent in writing. These text messages show clear evidence of financial abuse and potentially fraudulent misrepresentation of marital assets. Second, he transferred marital funds to a third party without your consent, which directly violates the co-control agreements you both signed years ago. And third, he's currently out of state, which gives us a valuable window to act before he can make any additional moves or hide more assets. She pulled out a legal pad and began writing notes with the speed of someone dictating strategy to herself, her pen moving rapidly across the page. Here's exactly what we're going to do. Monday morning, I'll file for emergency relief to freeze all remaining joint accounts. We'll also request a temporary restraining order preventing him from accessing any marital assets until a court can review the entire situation. The fact that he transferred money to his girlfriend's personal account rather than a legitimate business entity works strongly in our favor and makes this case much easier to win. But it was her next words that made me sit up straighter and pay even closer attention. More importantly, we're going to subpoena every financial record related to this so-called real estate venture. If Sky Winters accepted marital funds under false pretenses, if this isn't actually a legitimate business investment, she could be facing serious civil liability for receiving stolen property. The implications hit me immediately, and I felt a surge of satisfaction unlike anything I'd ever experienced. You mean she could be legally responsible for returning the money? Potentially, yes. And if we can prove she knew the funds were taken without your consent, the penalties become much more severe. Judith's smile was sharp and thoroughly professional. I've seen this pattern before. Younger women who get involved with married men often don't understand they're making themselves vulnerable to legal action when they accept money that isn't rightfully theirs. She continued outlining our comprehensive strategy, explaining how we'd document every aspect of Darren's deception and build a case that would not only protect my remaining assets, but potentially recover everything he'd already stolen. The approach was exactly what I'd hoped for: aggressive, thorough, and designed to catch Darren completely off guard. There's one more thing, Judith added, leaning back in her chair with obvious satisfaction. Your husband's hunting trip alibi actually works strongly in our favor. If he's been posting about his weekend on social media while simultaneously claiming he's in the mountains with no cell service, we can use that to demonstrate a clear pattern of deception. Modern betrayals leave digital footprints that earlier generations couldn't have imagined. As I left her office an hour later, I felt the strangest sensation, relief mixed with genuine anticipation. For months, I'd been watching my marriage deteriorate, without understanding why or knowing how to stop the downward spiral. Now I had a detailed plan, a clear timeline, and a legal advocate who understood exactly how to turn Darren's betrayal against him. The hunting weekend, that was supposed to mark the beginning of his exciting new life with Sky, was about to become the biggest mistake he'd ever made in his entire life. Sunday evening brought the first crack in Darren's carefully constructed narrative. He called just before 8 o'clock, his voice artificially cheerful as he described his amazing hunting experience and the huge buck his friend Bradley had supposedly taken down earlier that day. But I could hear something else underneath the manufactured enthusiasm, nervous energy, like someone rehearsing a story they weren't entirely confident about telling. The guys want to stay another day, he said, the words coming just a little too quickly to sound natural. There's some opportunity to track this elk that the guides think we can find if we're patient. I might not be back until Tuesday evening. Of course, he wanted to extend his trip. More time with Sky, more time to solidify their plans before facing the consequences of what he'd done. But his transparent lie gave me exactly what I needed: additional time to implement Judith's strategy before he realized what was happening. That sounds absolutely wonderful, I replied, keeping my voice warm and supportive. Make sure you get some good photos for your social media. I know how much you enjoy sharing your adventures with everyone. The pause that followed told me everything I needed to know. Darren had been so focused on creating his hunting alibi that he'd completely forgotten about the digital trail he'd been leaving. If he'd really been in the mountains with no cell service, how had he been able to send me detailed text messages about real estate investments? And more importantly, what had he actually been posting online while supposedly disconnected from civilization? After hanging up, I spent the evening conducting my own thorough investigation. Darren's social media accounts told a fascinating and contradictory story. On Thursday, he'd posted a photo of hunting gear laid out on our bed, with the caption, "Ready for a real man's weekend in the wilderness." On Friday, there were no posts at all, which was consistent with being in an area without cell service. But Saturday afternoon, right around the time he'd sent me those devastating texts about transferring our savings, he'd posted a photo of an expensive restaurant meal in Santa Fe with the caption, "Sometimes the hunting lodge surprises you with amazing food." The photo showed restaurant-quality plating and what appeared to be lobster tail with garnish, a hunting lodge serving gourmet seafood. The story was falling apart completely. I took screenshots of everything and added them to my growing evidence file. But the real revelation came when I checked Sky's social media accounts. She'd been far less careful about maintaining the fiction, apparently assuming that I would never think to investigate their weekend activities. Her Instagram story from Saturday showed a champagne toast with perfectly manicured nails and what looked like an expensive hotel room in the background. The timestamp matched exactly with when Darren had sent me his cruel text messages about their real estate venture and my supposed lack of ambition. I saved everything: screenshots, timestamps, even the metadata from the photos that would prove exactly where they'd been taken and when. By the time I finished documenting their weekend deception, I had a comprehensive record that would make Darren's hunting trip story completely impossible to maintain in court. Monday morning couldn't come fast enough. I'd spent the weekend moving between fury and calculation, but now I felt something else entirely: the cold satisfaction of having superior information and a better strategy than my opponents. Darren thought he was playing a game where he held all the cards. He'd stolen our money, secured his girlfriend's future, and left me with nothing but broken trust and empty accounts. What he didn't realize was that he'd been playing checkers while I'd been preparing for chess. At 7 o'clock Monday morning, I was sitting in my car outside Judith's office with a coffee and a folder full of evidence that would turn Darren's triumph into his complete downfall. My phone buzzed with a text from him. "Miss you, babe. Can't wait to come home and share all the hunting stories." I smiled as I typed my response. "Can't wait to hear every detail. I'm sure it will be absolutely fascinating." Within hours, Darren would discover that his boring conservative wife had been far busier during his hunting weekend than he could have possibly imagined. Judith's Monday morning legal blitz was a masterpiece of precision and timing. By 10 in the morning, she'd filed emergency motions with the family court requesting immediate freeze orders on all our remaining joint accounts. By noon, she'd served Travant Corporation with a subpoena demanding all records related to Darren's recent time-off requests and expense reports. By 2 in the afternoon, she'd filed for a temporary restraining order preventing any further transfers of marital assets. But the real devastation came when she served Sky Winters with a comprehensive civil lawsuit demanding the immediate return of the $87,000 plus interest and attorney fees. "Your husband's girlfriend just learned that accepting stolen marital funds makes her legally liable for restitution," Judith informed me during our afternoon phone call. "Her real estate venture is about to become very expensive." The speed of Judith's actions caught everyone completely off guard. Darren was still in Santa Fe, blissfully unaware that his financial world was collapsing back home. Sky was scrambling to find a lawyer to explain how she'd suddenly become a defendant in a civil lawsuit. And I was discovering that revenge served efficiently was infinitely more satisfying than revenge served hot. The first call came from our bank's fraud department, informing me that suspicious activity flags had been placed on all accounts associated with my Social Security number. The second call came from Darren's supervisor at Travant Corporation, asking if I knew why their legal department had received subpoenas related to my husband's recent travel expenses. But the most satisfying call came from Bradley Morrison, one of Darren's supposed hunting companions. "Veronica, I'm really confused," he said, his voice uncertain and concerned. "Some lawyer's office called, asking about our hunting trip this weekend, but Darren told us weeks ago that he had to cancel because of a family emergency. We went without him. Is everything okay?" Everything was absolutely perfect. Tuesday afternoon brought the first cracks in Darren's composure. He called from the road, supposedly driving back from his successful hunting expedition, but his voice carried an edge of panic that he couldn't quite hide. "Veronica, did you do something with our bank accounts? I tried to access our checking account for gas money, and it's showing some kind of restriction." I let the silence stretch for a moment before responding with carefully calibrated concern. "That's strange. I haven't touched anything. Maybe you should call the bank when you get home. You know how paranoid they become about unusual activity these days." "Unusual activity?" His voice pitched higher. "What kind of unusual activity?" "Oh, I don't know. Maybe large transfers or out-of-state transactions. You know how banks are these days, always looking for suspicious patterns." I paused, then added with perfect innocence, "How was the hunting, by the way? Did you get good cell service up in the mountains? Your text messages came through so clearly." The silence that followed told me he was beginning to understand that his weekend of triumph was about to become something very different. When Darren finally arrived home that evening, I was waiting in our living room with a cup of tea and a manila folder. He looked exhausted, and not from hunting. His designer hunting clothes were suspiciously clean for someone who'd supposedly spent 3 days tracking elk through mountain terrain. "We need to talk," he said, dropping his overnight bag by the door. "Yes, we do." I gestured to the chair across from me. "Sit down, Darren. Let's discuss your real estate investment strategy." The color drained from his face as he recognized the legal documents spilling out of my folder. His hunting weekend was officially over, and his education in the consequences of financial betrayal was about to begin. As I reflected on the swift and complete dismantling of his plans, I realized that revenge, when executed with precision and intelligence, was indeed a dish best served cold and efficiently. Darren had underestimated the quiet one, and that mistake was going to cost him everything he thought he'd gained. If this story taught you anything, let it be this: never underestimate someone who's been quietly building power while you've been making noise. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one who's been taking notes the whole time.